I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization while a review is conducted to assess the World Health Organization's role in severely mismanaging and covering up the spread of the coronavirus. Everybody knows what's going on there.
That was President a short time ago announcing suspension of the $100 million+ in funding the United States gives the World Health Organization every year. That's a wise thing to do. The WHO has operated as a branch of Chinese state propaganda throughout this tragedy. And speaking of propaganda, for months, the notion that the coronavirus may have escaped from a lab, one of 2 biolabs in Wuhan, was dismissed as a conspiracy theory in this country, mostly because the Chinese government wanted it dismissed as a conspiracy theory. That's what our media said to us. But now, newly leaked State Department cables are giving the idea more credence than ever. Fox correspondent Jillian Turner has the very latest on that story. Hey, Jillian.
Hey, Tucker. So for weeks now, U.S. lawmakers have been arguing that China's government has been covering up the true origins of the coronavirus outbreak in Wuhan.
The China virus could have been a local health problem in Wuhan if the Chinese Communist Party had been transparent and honest.
Beijing claims the virus originated at an animal market, but now the Washington Post reports new evidence pointing elsewhere. 2 State Department cables warning about safety issues at a Wuhan infectious diseases lab. The first cable, dated January 2018, quote, warns that the lab's work on bat coronaviruses and their potential human transmission represented a risk of a new SARS-like pandemic. Those cables note the lab had insufficient technicians to operate safely, something Senator Tom Cotton raised with Fox News 10 days ago.
It's entirely possible that they were conducting good and reasonable scientific experiments in those laboratories, but they had bad safety practices.
Now, a new report estimates that the real number of coronavirus cases inside China is actually closer to 2.9 million cases, as opposed to the 83,000 Beijing is claiming. The Communist Party has deliberately made estimation difficult, but outside of Wuhan City and Hubei province, cases are now low by a factor of 100 or more. As of this evening, Tucker, the State Department is not confirming the existence of these cables, let alone commenting on their contents. But a few days ago, Peter Navarro told us he believes one of the reasons China's government continued to cover up the real case numbers during the early days of the outbreak was so they could buy time to purchase and stockpile PPE and medical equipment from all around the world. Tucker?
Seems likely. Jillian Turner, thanks so much for that report. So the lab in Wuhan was unsafe. That was obvious to Americans visiting there 2 years ago. And because of the practices there, the Chinese may have unleashed a global pandemic on the rest of us. Here's something remarkable and upsetting. The work in that lab, including its research into disease-carrying bats, was funded in part by U.S. taxpayers through the National Institutes of Health. Hard to believe that's true, but it is. Congressman Matt Gaetz represents Florida. He joins us tonight to follow up on this story. Congressman, that's one of those stories that if you had said that out loud a week ago, I think even I might have dismissed you as insane, but it's true. How did this happen?
Yeah, I'm against funding Chinese research in our country, but I'm sure against funding it in China. The NIH gives this $3.7 million grant to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They then advertise that they need coronavirus researchers. Following that, coronavirus erupts in Wuhan. And then what's really troubling to me is that either conspicuously or miraculously, the Wuhan Institute of Virology is able to sequence the virus on January 2nd, but China doesn't admit to the virus existing to January 9th, and then the Wuhan Institute of Virology doesn't release this important scientific information to the world until January 12th. So at best, Americans are funding people who are lying to us, and at worst, we're funding people who we knew had problems handling pathogens, who then birthed a monster virus onto the world.
By the way, China is about to eclipse us in terms of the size of its economy, if it hasn't already, and it seems like it already may have. Either way, why would we be sending any money to China for any purpose?
There is a far too cozy relationship between U.S. research and Chinese research because there are some research institutions in our country who realize the short-term benefit of Chinese cash. But that doesn't excuse our government. And what should really trouble viewers is that this is an active grant. This isn't something of yesteryear. And so I've called on Secretary Azar to immediately halt this grant to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They have not been honest, and at worst, they've been negligent to the point of many deaths throughout the world.
This will live on for all time as a metaphor for our incompetence and self-loathing. It looks like there is evidence that this virus escaped from the lab. We don't know that that happened, but it's not a crazy supposition. And now it turns out we were funding the lab. Do you think, just to bottom line it for us, that someone can end the funding to the Wuhan Institute of Virology? If we can't do that, I mean, really.
Well, I believe that Secretary Azar can do it with the stroke of a pen, and certainly it is consistent with the fantastic news that President Trump gave us today, that the United States is no longer going to be a patsy for these America Last organizations like the W.H.O. and the WTO. We've been taken advantage of in those globalist infrastructures for far too long under both Republicans and Democrats. President Trump gives us the chance to liberate ourselves from this and to put our people, our health, and our economy first.
That would be nice. Congressman Gates, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tucker.